Okay, everyone. So today I was going to talk about spiritual ego. And this being a healing call, I'm actually not particularly sure we'll manage to do any healing in relation to that because it's a process. And I guess part of the discussion is actually expecting healing to happen and to control the outcomes and the results of this healing. But this is a topic that came to mind recently, and I thought, I just really had to discuss that. So, first of all, what is spiritual ego? And what are we talking about here? It is an identification with being right, I think, to me. So think about, we can start with, let's say, fundamentalist versions of a religion. We can think of Christian fundamentalists, we can think of Muslims, we can think of, well, maybe to an extent, Orthodox Judaism in relation to other Jews, and so on and so forth. So a version of religion that says, well, I know how to do things right, I have the right practice, I have the right way of praying, I have the right way of living. And my scripture supports that. And I live exactly according to the scripture, whereas you are not. And the scripture is very easy to understand, or the holy book, or a code of law, or even a moral code is very easy to understand. So what everyone else is doing is corrupting it and not following the right thing or putting innovations on it, whereas we go back to the original practice. And of course, once you start digging into that practice, you see that a lot of it is actually not in the Holy Book, but in the later commentaries, additions, or traditions in the Holy Book, and the fundamental tradition that claims to go back to the root actually is an innovation of a couple of 100 years. Everywhere you will see that. I'm referring currently to Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, but I'm sure it goes everywhere. I'm thinking of Protestant evangelicals that have a 200-year, maybe at most, history of Wahhabists, of certain Orthodox Jewish sects, and so on. So that it doesn't really matter who it is. I'm just using that as an example. It's neither good nor bad. But it's the same tendency. I personally, in my experience, I had mostly was Christian fundamentalists over the years. And even attended some of those communities, and then later on I met people across other religions. So, but my point is, why does this happen? Well, because it's very easy for the mind, for the personality, for the ego to put things in a structure. We need structure, we need routine, and we need right and wrong. Especially for children who grew up in homes without routine, without rules, without structure, they tend to have more anxiety, they are uncertain, first of all, they are anxious children, but they also have more inner anxiety because they don't know which rules to follow. Now, of course, if the household is oppressive and extremely strict, that is another cause for anxiety. But children need routines. So in our stages of, spiritual immaturity, we need routines and very strict very clear concepts of, well, this is right, this is wrong, this is the way to do it, and this is not the way to do it. So, you have to, I don't know, wash one hand 3 times, the other hand 3 times, and so on. And if you're not doing it, then the whole procedure is invalid. And this is important. But then as we grow up, right, other things come into play. We learn that it's also important to have the right attitude, the right intention. We learn that other people who come from different households, who may have had different rules, are equally valid. And the fact that they eat with a hand and not with a fork doesn't really make their food worse, uh, or them worse people, and doesn't really say anything about their quality of life. So our worldview expands. And sometimes it's difficult for the ego, because to expand a worldview, we need to accept that we are not the center of the universe, that our understanding, our way of life, the little world that we lived in, it's not the center of the universe. And those moments come over and over again in life. I remember my world started breaking down when I spent 3 months in Jerusalem, and everything I thought about as right and as, my world was ordered and structured, and I had a retirement plan. And I thought I had the right beliefs and the right attitudes, and I knew the ways to work on them, when suddenly everything collapsed, or started collapsing, because I saw that other people had the right beliefs and the right attitudes, but more importantly, they had the right heart. Their heart was in exactly the same place as mine, despite their different approaches, different opinions, different history, different traditions. And that's when the mind starts to open. So we see that the heart starts to open. Sorry, that's an important distinction here. So we see that everywhere, not just in beliefs. We see that, as I said, in growing up. We see that in, traveling. Traveling also crushes our our ego to an extent. That little box that we put things in and keep it safe. Falling in love usually has a very ego crushing quality, because we are forced to accept another person completely different from us most of the time. So a spiritual ego is then identifying with being spiritually right. I am right and you are wrong. I think we all have it. Maybe if we're not spiritual, we believe in morals, or we believe in a certain code of ethics, code of living, and then everyone who falls outside of it, maybe we say, oh, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious, so I hate religions and I hate the church, or whatever other religious structure there is. It's the root of all evil and the cause of all wars and all destruction. Or maybe communism is the cause of all wars and all destruction, and so on and so forth. So there is a healthy competition for who who is the cause of all wars and all evil and all destruction. And we're not going to go into that. But lately in my work, obviously, I mean, I don't really work with religious fundamentalists, because they wouldn't be attracted to this type of work. But to say that in the New Age, or the so-called conscious community, to say that we don't have, for people to say that, oh, we don't have that, is also wrong, of course, because it's the same type of fundamentalism and the same type of spiritual ego I've often been seeing. Well, I use crystals and not, but I don't go to church because they are all brainwashed and backward. And as I said, religion is the root of all evil, or patriarchy, or both. And they are not open-minded enough. Oh, those narrow-minded people, right? So there is this competition for who is more narrow-minded and who is. But what, in relation to my work, of course, it's a little bit more subtle. The spiritual ego can be very, very subtle because it's not about, and very dangerous and very tricky to get out of, because it's often connected to very good things and high profile things, like, helping others, or caring for the environment, or wanting to improve oneself spiritually. So I wanted to focus on this one little aspect of it, which can affect many, especially, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, and forgive me if I am, but I've seen it especially in men, because maybe it's related to that masculine drive for achieving, for going forward. I've seen that in men, especially in my work. So to me, it's related more to a masculine drive. But what I'm talking about is the drive to achieve spiritually. I want to be something, and I'm going to do it now. So we have those people who are engaging in dubious spiritual practices, or maybe not dubious, but outright dangerous, moving the energy. I had a friend who was summoning demons because he said he was studying Hermeticism, and so I'm summoning demons in my apartment and drawing the particular mandalas or symbols to attract the right demon. This is true. I'm not imagining these things, so it's easier to explain what I mean by way of example, I suppose. I've had someone who told me they were raising Kundalini, and it opened up their energy field. And well, by the sound of it, they were incapable of even listening or relating to reality anymore. And it's of course very different, very difficult to reach out to such a person, because they think they have achieved high degree of spiritual enlightenment, spontaneous enlightenment. But enlightenment is not really spontaneous. So the lack of spiritual maturity, practice, and discipline, of course, coupled with these energetic practices that open up the energy field to everything, so the mind kind of goes out of the window and the person is left with no structure. But of course, it's impossible to reach out or talk to a person at this stage, because they are not really responsive to any input. I've had someone who was meditating naked in a cave here where I live for 2 weeks, drinking ayahuasca from a plastic bottle. They brewed it in a ceremony at midnight before the occasion. And well, you may think I'm just terribly lucky to meet all those people, and they may be reflecting a part of me that is also crazy and high on my own spiritual ego, and you're probably right. But it's also a great example of how things can go terribly wrong with the best intentions. So the intention may be perfect, the intention may be really right. Well, I want to be enlightened. But then you may ask yourself, well, why do I want to be enlightened? Well, the person who had the spontaneous awakening wanted to bring his twin flame about. He met someone whom he believed was his twin flame, and he wanted to be with her. So he just thought, well, if I work on myself, this would mean that I bring her about. Or rather, he read that, well, if you work on your own spiritual development, it will affect your twin flame. So the more you work on your own spiritual development, the more your twin flame will come closer to you. And you know what? That was actually a reflection of my own experience, because I remember that my journey into this field of the Akashic Records and spirituality deepened. I wouldn't say that my spiritual journey started at this point, because I was interested in spirituality before, but maybe I got pushed out of my box and started doing things I would have never done before, precisely for the same reason, because someone told me, because I read or found somewhere that, your own development affects your twin flame. So whatever you do for yourself, you do for them. And I thought, this is the way I'm going to bring about that union. Did it work? Make a guess. No, it didn't. It did bring about the maybe first awakening or some sort of opening up for the twin flame, but their ego went along with that. So we're going to get to that story. But there was my ego as well. I wanted to manipulate my twin flame by my own spiritual development. So in a way, I didn't start spiritual development for my own good, or to improve myself, or to be with God, or to make my soul perfect, or to come to heaven, or however you may call it. But I started it for one purpose only: to be with my twin flame. So there we go, again, something for myself. So am I surprised that someone who did the same thing, also, of course, in much greater proportions, comes to me? No. So the person who was living in a cave was wanted to receive enlightenment. Why? Well, because he wanted to know what to do with his life. He was completely lost. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want to go deeper into healing. He wanted to just scratch the surface and become a great healer and teacher and be something great. And this was his way of being something great, without doing the work, without going deeper. Well, he said, I don't have 3 years to study. I don't have 4 years to study. I have to do it now. I'm guessing you know what happened. He got stuck exactly where he was for much more than 3 or 4 years. So all of these cases where we kind of push and we want to control the universe and we want to bring the results now, or like someone said, well, can you guarantee me that you are going to shift these energies and things will go back to exactly the way they were before? Like, I think even a surgeon cannot guarantee you the results of the operation. But in the field of spiritual development, absolutely nothing can ever go back to the way it was before. But we want that, right? We want to control the universe. We will do whatever it takes to get our way. If it means summoning demons, please. If it means meditating for 3 hours, yes. If it gives me what I want, I will meditate for 6 hours. If it gives me what I want, I will live in a monastery for 3 months. And then, when it doesn't give me what I want, that's where actual spiritual development begins. But we think that, I thought that, I could manipulate the reality. Well, maybe I did it in a more subtle way. These examples were too obvious, too bright, I would never do anything like that. But the same trait, the same desire to control the outcome. I will pray in order to feel peaceful. Or will you continue praying if you're not feeling peaceful anymore? I will do this practice in order to get something out of it. And look, I'm not saying doing things without any point. That brings us back to the fundamentalism part. But checking those motives, like, why exactly am I doing these things? To get what I want, or to allow myself to be transformed by them. But also, I think this is a point, this is a stage in spiritual evolution. That's how, I mean, I don't think, I know that for sure, that this is our hook. That's how we get dragged into spiritual development and proper evolution, proper awakening, and proper enlightenment, because we go from those lower places where our ego is grasping and wants, to get what I want, use the things for own good. And we get hooked. And then what we want gets taken away from us brutally, and we will do everything to get it back. So we start running around from psychic to healer to helper, energy worker. We start learning things ourselves. We do everything possible, hopefully, without summoning demons or opening up our chakras to the extent we can't close anything anymore, or, going insane and ending up in a psych ward. This is also possible. But hopefully that doesn't happen. And we go deeper and deeper into that field, into the area that we are meant to be working on. And we gradually lose that ego because we get beaten up a bit over and over again. Things don't go our way. We realize that we can't influence every outcome, that some things we have to live with because they are part of our lesson, they're part of our karma. Some things we can change dramatically, some things were never meant to be, and we develop that wisdom to accept the reality as it is. And gradually, the less we resist, the more of those veils start falling. We realize that we'll never live in perfection. And yet, paradoxically, that we live in an absolutely perfect world. That we already have everything we want. We develop the capacity to live with the paradox. We develop wisdom. And that comes from falling 10,000 times and rising 10,000 times, obviously. But when, in the beginning of the journey, in the beginning of spiritual awakening, I believe this is our hook. We start running. Some people are running, they want their twin flame back. No, if you don't give me my twin flame back within 1 month, I'm not going to work with you ever again. Well, but I can't bring your twin flame back. Nobody can. It doesn't work like this. No, they will not listen. No, I'm going to find someone who will bring me my twin flame back. Then, of course, 5 years down the line, they realize that, well, maybe it was a bit of a different issue at the core to begin with. You can't just manipulate reality. Oh, but I want my money back. I'm bankrupt and I want my money back. Well, but maybe the lesson was that you can't bypass spiritual and moral laws. That your lesson was not about money at all, but about cutting corners and forgiveness. And of course, that becomes clearer 5 years down the line as well. Then, of course, people, sometimes it's a bit amusing because someone asked me once, oh, I'm getting very tired and emotional, and also have aches and pains and chills over my body. And I was wondering if these were the ascension symptoms. And it's true, there are whole sites developed devoted to ascension symptoms. Ascension symptoms. It's like catching a flu. Maybe this thing that is going around now is the ascension symptoms, actually. And if you prefer to think of it this way, it might be partially true. But ascension is not a symptom. It's not a disease you can catch. It's the natural result of spiritual evolution. It goes. There are pitfalls and there are dangers, but it's also not a disease. Enlightenment is not a disease. Spontaneous states of spiritual realization do happen. We get those glimpses of reality, but we have to bring ourselves up. We have to raise our own level of consciousness to that spontaneous awareness we may have received. Because what often happens, we get, for example, someone meets their twin flame, or someone has a religious experience or a spiritual experience where they maybe had a revelation of an angel, or were talking to the divine, right? Or met their twin flame and all their energy system aligned, and they remembered all their past lives. But what we are forgetting in those cases is that these experiences by themselves, they don't make us holy, they don't make us different, they don't make us enlightened. They're just spontaneous states of awareness. It's like something from above brought in, like a flashlight that shines on you in the darkness. But once you turn that flashlight off, it's still dark, and you are still you. So you may receive, or a bright beam of light, you may receive that, and it illumines everything, and then it's switched off, and you don't have the capacity to produce your own light yet. So it's a spontaneous state. It's meant to be as a hook, but for lack of spiritual foundations and good instruction, many people think that it's that already makes them special. I used to go around thinking that for a very long time, since my teenage years, because I had those states of connecting to the divine, and of receiving claircognizance, this intuitive knowing, deep awareness of spiritual truth. And I thought, well, that makes me special. And it didn't, of course. It didn't. And some people are more lucky to receive, more instruction and more critical mind. And some also have experiences that are so powerful, they get completely blown away. And so we all have our different stories. But I wanted to bring your attention to this fact that those psychic or spiritual, or, those supernatural experiences in themselves, they don't enlighten us. They actually don't raise our vibration permanently. It's a temporary experience. It's meant as a hook, but to raise our vibration, to bring our energy field, our nervous and energy system, to bring our point of, or let's say our level of consciousness, to bring it to a permanent state, we need to do certain work. It doesn't need to be lifetimes of work at this stage. Probably once we're having those experiences, we are ready to be enlightened in this lifetime, hopefully. But there is a point of discipline, and there are certain spiritual stages that one needs to go through, including having that flashlight, that beam of light switched off, so that you realize that if peace can be taken away, it wasn't peace in the first place. That if light can be taken away, it wasn't your own light to begin with. And that you have to start walking by yourself. This part of the spiritual path, what some call the dark night of the soul, it can't be taken away because it's a natural part of learning to walk by yourself. So there is no such thing as ascension symptoms, and there is no such thing as bringing back your twin flame in 28 days, or spontaneous enlightenment. Boom. I was sitting on a porch one day, and then 30 minutes, and I became enlightened, folks. I mean, wow. I am now enlightened. I have realized that all things are one. Now, those realizations come, yes, but without that's where the problem lies. Without adequate wisdom and discipline and spiritual practice, and without a teacher who can set things straight and say, well, if you are enlightened, go chop wood. We tend to run away, and then our ego rises and gets attached to these things. So that's when the spiritual ego comes into play. It says, wow, now I am enlightened. Now I'm going to teach others. Now I'm going to be that that great person who can, move the energies, summon demons, bring the twin flames back, drink ayahuasca from the bottle, and receive profound revelations. And I don't know what else. Heal people. We're all healers, so I'm just going to lay my hands on everyone. I think someone else did that as well, just laying hands on everyone. Well, my friend, who was a Christian at the time, she was just praying over people in a metro station so that they may be saved and brought to Jesus, because that was her thing at the time. So we all do those things. We say, wow, I've become enlightened, so now I'm. And then, of course, reality crashes onto it, and we realize that, well, I guess it wasn't really enlightenment. So in absence of a spiritual teacher who we are able to listen to, it's a big question. If an ego so spontaneously enlightened would want to listen to anyone, and would want to hear no, to take no for an answer, would want to understand that what you're asking for is impossible because your path is different. Maybe if an ego so spontaneously enlightened will listen to a teacher, then, it will actually be brought back onto the path of normal enlightenment, the actual enlightenment, when you can be enlightened and go chop wood and bring water. Because mostly what the spiritual ego tries to tell us, that, well, these things are not for me. I'm not going to work like all those normal people. I'm not cleaning floors. That's for all those other unenlightened folks. I'm going to be something special. I'm different. It's the same ego of a wounded child, or wounded boy, wounded girl, that says, you all hate me, I hate myself. I'm going to show you that I'm going to be something special. My mother hates me, my father hates me, I don't fit in at school. Well, I'm going to show you all I'm going to be someone special. So it's that same ego that now attaches to a spiritual reality and says, I'm different, I'm special, I'm a starseed, I'm a twin flame, I'm a healer. I'm going to be different. And I'm not saying these things are not true. I'm just saying that you can be an enlightened cleaner. You can be perfectly happy with what is, and you may have never read a book in your life. You may have never heard about starseeds, and yet you would be happier, more productive, and more pure than 1,000 of them combined. And you may heal people with a touch of your hand without even giving it a second thought. Yet, because you would do it in such an egoless manner, without identifying with it at all, that it would just come and go. You would be a pure channel. So these things, unfortunately, our wounded ego can attach to those spiritual states just as easily as it would attach to being wounded or being, hurt and broken. They all hate me. Well, look, I'm going to be something special. I'm going to show the world that I'm different. So there isn't really a healing we can do about that. There isn't really anything magical that I can just snap my fingers and say, okay, guys, and this is how we deal with spiritual ego. This is how we heal it once and for all. No, it's going to pop its head up over and over again. We gradually, with wisdom and with practice, and as we fall 10,000 times, we realize that it's not the other's fault, it's our own. Our world is creation of our own making. And maybe we need to put a request out there to the universe for a good spiritual teacher. It will reply, maybe not immediately, but it will. I can guarantee you that. Just keep asking with neutral mind, with purity of intention. Be in a neutral state, but I really need a spiritual teacher for spiritual community and for consistent spiritual practice. It doesn't have to involve hours and hours. But a spiritual teacher who is a true teacher, humble teacher, and a practice. Some people search for a spiritual teacher for years, but they do find one eventually, always. So this is, to me, from my perspective, this is the best way to safeguard against those traps of spiritual ego and all those ascension symptoms. And of course, for some people, it's not funny. It's not funny anymore because people do end up in a psych ward. People do end up being completely broken, completely disconnected from reality. They're unable to function in the real world. And maybe someone can help them. I personally don't even know how to in some of the cases. People have taken ayahuasca journeys and have experienced a lot of negative things, opened up their fields to negativity, energies, entities, demons. There are stories that just make you grateful that, you never touched paths, you never crossed paths with anything like that. And I understand it was their choice as a soul to go through these things, to experience some of these things. But from some of these things, there is no going back, even at the soul level. So it can be funny in certain cases, but in certain cases, it's not funny. It's just a lesson to us that we have to be extremely careful not to get ourselves, not to run away with these things, because some of these spiritual things, they need caution and maturity and care and protection, and we can't just assume that now we can move mountains and order demons about or open up our chakras, raise our kundalini, or whatever it is. So I think the best safeguard is to find a good, sound spiritual teacher and a good spiritual community that you feel is grounded is practical and is maybe skeptical to very outward, very outrageous manifestations of spiritual powers, that's usually a good sign that it's grounded and safe. But we have to be, as I said, very, very careful as to what we open ourselves up to. And believe me, there is no such thing as ascension symptoms or spontaneous enlightenment. So with that, I want to wish you many blessings, and I wish you well. And I hope this was helpful and not too much doom and gloom. And if you need me, welcome to find out more about my work at healing-radiance.com, where I also offer healing sessions and intuitive healing and guidance and Akashic record readings. So thank you. Namaste.